Support WrestleTalk!
Make WrestleTalk.com your homepage for all the latest breaking wrestling news. Last night, after a year since they cancelled the first one, AEW presented Blood and Guts, their version of the WCW classic War Games match. Cody wanting to do something his dad invented? I'm shocked. However, despite a nearly 40-minute epic match featuring plenty of one half of the Blood and Guts title, the finish seems to have upset a portion of the viewers. Our live stream reactions we did to the show on WrestleTalk podcast were majoritively negative, with many calling it a botch and comparable to the disastrous ending of AEW's Revolution in February. I'll be covering the match in more detail when we get to the review, but the finish saw MJF threaten to throw Chris Jericho off the roof of the cage, and Sammy Guevara of Inner Circle surrendered on his behalf to save Jericho's life. This gave Pinnacle the win, and MJF, being the dastardly heel that he is, threw him off anyway to safely land on a visible crash mat. AEW's crew seemed to enjoy it, with Taz tweeting, "Holy S-word, AEW Dynamite, Blood and Guts, all 10 men busted their asses in that insane fight, bravo." And Dustin Rhodes tweeted, "Incredible, just incredible." I don't think just incredible was in the match, but fair enough, Dustin. The finish was divisive though, with many people feeling the surrender concept lacked dramatic flair, especially since NXT's War Game matches have established themselves to a new audience as crazy stunt shows that end in pinfalls. But it was Jericho's bump that really seemed to trigger some fans, who felt that it wasn't spectacular enough. One fan tweeted, "What did Booker T say again? Right. AEW comes across as an indie show." And they weren't the only ones, as more and more replies to AEW's recap of the bump flooded in, with this fan asking us to imagine a world where the Horsemen would surrender in a War Games match. Oof. Hope he doesn't plan to watch Full Brawl 97 anytime soon. Even NXT's Shotzi Blackheart got in the action, immediately tweeting after the match a gif of someone enjoying a soft landing onto a cushiony bed. What's amazing about this reaction, however, is that less than a year ago, fans were very upset at AEW over the Matt Hardy-Sammy Guevara incident at All Out, but now wish that Jericho took a much bigger bump. As Adam Pacitti brilliantly put it, I get that Jericho landing on a clearly padded stage wasn't the most impressive bump we've ever seen, but I'll never understand wrestling fans who seem to want to see wrestlers take legitimately nasty falls and inevitably end up hurting themselves. The dude is 50. As a quick follow-up to yesterday's story about Daniel Bryan's contract ending with WWE, Quizzlemania champion Sean Ross Sapp is reporting over on Fightful Select that those in AEW are not expecting him to jump ship, and he'll most likely re-sign with WWE. However, those in WWE reportedly heard that Bryan would not be staying with the company. So you know what that means? Daniel Bryan's AEW confirmed. We've got more news coverage over on WrestleTalk.com, including a story about the plans for the tag team of RKBro, which you can check out by clicking the link in the video description down below. But let's get to it, because it's Thursday, and you know what that means. It's time to review AEW Blood and Guts in about 5 minutes. Thanks for your support on Patreon, Kevin, Wakeham, and Dustin, the Professor Layton. The show opened with a tag match between Jon Moxley and Eddie Kingston versus Michael Nakazawa and AEW champion Kenny Omega. Like opening the Crossroads episode of Dynamite with that Shaquille O'Neal tag match back in March, it was a smart call here by AEW to use some of their biggest stars in the first match on what is likely going to be one of the most watched episodes to date. Kingston and Moxley won after Omega bailed on Nakazawa, and after the match the Young Bucks and Good Brothers laid out Moxley and Kingston to stand tall. Omega hit the one-winged angel on Eddie Kingston for Nick Jackson to count the 3 to pretend they won all along. It was a good post-match beatdown and presumably sets up Mox and Kingston versus the Bucks for the tag titles at Double or Nothing, which, yeah, let's be honest, that should be a great match. Cody Rhodes versus QT Marshall had the usual Cody action with its confusing decisions on what does count as a DQ and what doesn't. At the start of the match, the referee stopped Cody from using his weight belt as a weapon, only for QT to use his instead in front of the referee. So why wasn't that a DQ? And at one point, Arn Anderson attacked QT Marshall in front of the referee, and that also wasn't a DQ. The near falls at the end were quite good though, with QT kicking out of Crossroads but tapping out the figure 4. Anthony Ogogo punched Cody in the ribs after the match to seemingly set up a singles match between them at Double or Nothing. Alex Marvez interviewed Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page, with the former getting in a line from Batman Forever, which I very much appreciated. Darby Allin attacked them both, leading to a brutal bump where Darby got thrown down some concrete steps. In hindsight, this bump only furthered the anger that fans had towards the Jericho bump at the end of the show. SCU won a 4-way tag match with some decent action, pinning Brian Pillman Jr. on the week where he was honoring his father. Couldn't you guys have pinned Griff Garrison instead? He was right there. We then found out that next week, number 1 ranked Orange Cassidy will take on number 2 ranked Pac to determine who will face Kenny Omega at Double or Nothing. It was a match that seemed bizarre and almost out of nowhere at first, but then you sit back and realize that Death Triangle and Best Friends have been feuding for weeks now because Pac has been beating up Orange Cassidy since Revolution last year. And both men have been racking up singles wins in the meantime, making them feel like big stars, including last week when Cassidy pinned Pentagon Jr. We all thought that AEW was going in one direction, and then it turns out we were playing checkers and they were playing chess. And it would seem that Cassidy is likely to win next week, as Kenny Omega cut a great promo on him after the announcement. Miro also announced that he'll be facing Darby Allin next week for the TNT Championship, which I expect he will win, on what is a stacked card. And then we got Blood and Guts. AEW were in a tough spot with Blood and Guts. While old school fans are used to WCW's classic format, which Trevor Dame on Twitter brilliantly compared to a series of hot tags and a sprint to the finish, while the NXT version has focused on the action and big spots that people will remember and talk about the next day. So AEW tried to appease both sides of the fences here with mixed results. To put the match over, it felt like a war. This felt like two teams that legitimately hated each other and wanted to hurt each other as brutally as they possibly could. A lot of men bled, with Cash Wheeler in particular getting cut deep. But I saw no guts, so false advertising, Tony. The first portion of the match was just brutal beatdown after brutal beatdown. It wasn't always clean, but that only added to the frantic war-like nature of it. War isn't pretty. The match also made Wardlow look like an absolute star. He got in and immediately beat up Santana Ortiz and Sammy Guevara on his own, despite them having a huge advantage. And his throw on Sammy into the cage was nuts. Once MJF and Jericho were both in, the match officially began and kicked off with a Civil War style stare down and charging clash, which I absolutely adored. FTR tore up the ring canvas only to get Spike pile-drivered onto the board for their troubles. Sammy did a coast to coast. Santana cut MJF open further by using a fork. Blood and Guts delivered on what it set out to do. Eventually, Tully got the keys from a referee to allow MJF to escape. Jericho followed and the two exchanged submissions on the roof. MJF then threatened the rest of the inner circle that he's going to throw Jericho off the roof, and Sammy surrendered to save him. MJF did it anyway to end the show. Personally, I thought it was a great match that totally delivered on what it set out to do. It felt like a war, and no one who walked into that match felt like they were going to walk out the same. All of the spots had stakes, all of the spots had meaning, and the execution of the finish with Sammy surrendering was sublime. The problem, though, is that it aired on TV, and American TV has a lot of commercial breaks. Jay Kohler timed out in our YouTube comments from last night's livestream that nearly 7 minutes of commercials aired in the 34-minute match. Luckily, I was watching on Fight, so I didn't get those interruptions, but even then you could feel the guys were stalling as they waited for their cue to come back for live TV. And the response we got from people watching along with us on WrestleTalk podcast was that the commercials ruined the flow of the match, particularly as it went into its final moments, which is a real shame. And it was a concern I shared on the WrestleTalk podcast a few weeks back, asking why this wasn't on pay-per-view. And in hindsight, yeah, I think this should have been on pay-per-view. And while I agree that the Jericho bump didn't have the best production values or camera angles to catch it, as it had exposed just how safe the landing was, I'm not going to demonize a wrestling company for protecting its wrestlers when they're taking huge risks. Overall, I enjoyed the match. I loved it, in fact, and I really enjoyed the show from top to bottom. But with the expectations set and some of the fan fallout, I would struggle to give this the full 5 out of 5, particularly as the commercial break stalled the blood and guts action. So I'm going to say 4, but believe me, it is a high 4 out of 5. And you can watch myself and Tempest the Wrestler review the show in much more detail on the WrestleTalk podcast later on today, so click the video that's on screen to set your reminder for that. That was a terrible little bit of ad-libbing. I'm now waiting for my easy prompter to catch up. What's going on with Daniel Bryan's WWE contract? Click the video below that to find out more. I've been Luke Owen. Jam that jam.